Welcome to another episode. I am really looking forward to a conversation today. And for those of you who are, knocking on the door of divorce or you're in the midst of it, the topic that we're going to be talking about today is one that I know that Lisa and I are extremely passionate about. And so today, my guest is Lisa Johnson from Been There, Got Out. And so, Lisa, I want to welcome you to my show.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Share just a little bit for people that maybe haven't been following you or don't know about the work that you have done and the experience that you bring to the table. Talk to us a little bit about that. And then also, as a subset to that, the impact that you've been able to have within the legal system, which I think ultimately serves as encouragement for people
Yeah.
that are in the midst of it. So, yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm Lisa Johnson. I always say I'm the female half of Been There, Got Out, and I am a high conflict divorce strategist that specializes in something called legal abuse, which we'll get into. And that's where our clients' exes are basically using the legal system to control, harass, intimidate, coerce, and or impoverish them. And it's awful because you think that the very system that you turn for relief makes things worse when you're in a situation with someone who's really abusive. So Chris and I, my partner, work with men and women all over the world. All of them are either getting out of a toxic relationship, dealing with a very difficult divorce. Custody battles are our specialty. And then we always say co-parenting hell, which we want to make sure they have the chance of the best outcome in family court and beyond. So ours are all the cases where the person says, my lawyer says this is the craziest situation I've ever seen, because they don't follow the normal cadence of a separation where both people kind of, the anger subsides and they want to move on with their lives. Not in our clients' cases. These are
Mm-mm.
the cases that go on for years, that cost hundreds of thousands, if not more, in dollars, that wear everyone down, that lawyers get fatigued, and worst of all, the kids are used as weapons in the middle of it. So they're it's about 10% of the cases, and that's all we deal with.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I know that, this is a heavy topic, right? Because I think exactly to your point, like there's this false sense of justice that people are like, well, if I can just get in front of the commissioner or if I can just get in front of the judge. And, that couldn't be further from the truth, right? And not only that, all the things that happen along the way, the manipulative, controlling aspects. And while I'm not dealing with the parenting side, I mean, obviously, the financial side, we're seeing a lot of that as well. And I call it like they're adhering to the damn method, right? They're dodging the disclosures, they're avoiding getting assets valued, they're misrepresenting information, and it becomes a real problem. And there are certainly some strategies I know that we use to help navigate through that. But talk to us a little bit about Jennifer's Law, because I know that that was something that, from an advocacy perspective, you played a really big role in getting that passed. So tell us what it is and then how you were able to make that happen.
Okay. Yeah, and certainly I don't take all the credit. There was 107 other people that testified during that in 2021. But basically, Jennifer's Law made my state of Connecticut the third in America to expand our legal definition of domestic violence to include something called coercive control. And so coercive control is like it's a big word, but it basically is when somebody's ex is using patterns of behavior to harm, punish, to threaten them, to make them feel like they are still dependent and can't escape the relationship. And so in the past, to get a restraining order or when custody was considered, people just looked at physical violence. Like, is somebody physically harming you or your child, and or is there imminent threat of physical harm? And besides that, nobody really cared. Now with Jennifer's Law, we have to look at the broader picture. Is there financial abuse, which we know is present in 99% of abusive relationships, and how that impacts everything? Is there psychological, verbal, emotional abuse, which of course is present in most of the cases as well? Legal abuse, which is a thing I specialize in, where people are constantly stuck in court because their ex keeps, filing frivolous motions or they won't adhere to the orders. Sexual abuse, digital, like cyber abuse and stalking, isolation, revenge porn, where somebody's threatening to post pictures of you, which could damage your reputation, damage your family, all kinds kinds of things affect your job. So all of that is now really looked at in a bigger picture, like I said, when it comes to safety issues in Connecticut. And then I was going to say that Massachusetts last year became the seventh state, but I just found an article that North Carolina just put out something. So they might become another state that's addressing coercive control in their laws. So it's exciting. But the UK has had these laws for years, and now America, state by state, is slowly developing their own. And each case is different. It has a different name, but it's getting to be more effective. I'm really glad people are learning what coercive control means.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think again, like, it is a real problem because again, I'm based here in Wisconsin and what you mentioned, right, as far as like, hey, if it's not physical or there's not imminent threat to danger, there's no action, right? And I know that the attorneys, to their credit, are feeling like they're handcuffed because they're like, this is what the law says. And if we're using, the statutes to be able to guide and direct our advice, we're really feeling like we're backed up against a wall. So I have said from the very beginning, like the only way for us to really make an impact or change at that level is to get the language in, the statutes changed. So I am hopeful, Lisa, that at some point in my career, I will see Wisconsin follow suit with Connecticut and New York or North Carolina and some of the other states that recognize it.
Yeah, but Rhonda, like a lot of times when I do a post that has something to do with laws in different states and people are like, oh, I wish it were my state, you can still make a case about coercive control without calling it that. Like we always think about how to make a persuasive case, it's really about focusing on someone's patterns of behavior and the impact it has on a situation. And a lot of times, if we're states that have coercive control laws, lawyers aren't familiar with the term. People don't understand it. So I like to go from a bottoms up, like a grassroots thing. I know a lot of people talk about the system has to change. It's never going to change in the years that your case is here. So we say from the bottom up, it's on you, and you can learn how to do this to create a really compelling case, and in the process, educate a judge on what you need and why you need it. And in my own case, in my own situation, all these years in court, I've seen it happen multiple times where I was able to get what I needed before coercive control laws, and in both Connecticut and New York, which doesn't have coercive control laws, I still was able to use the same details to get what I needed. So you should still have hope. It's about creating a really effective argument.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm thinking about, a lot of times people are directed to keep a log or keep details or journal or, snapshots of information. But how do we bridge the gap with, them spending all this time and energy, right, gathering the information that nobody really looks at anyways?
I love this question, Rhonda, because your timing is impeccable. So we do what we call strategic communication more than anything with everybody wherever they are in the process. And that is basically a system that feeds into your documentation, proper documentation for the case. And we just released a course a couple months ago. It's called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. Because documentation is such a confusing topic for people where they're like, I've got reams of stuff. I've been journaling for years. And no, you don't have time for that. We always say it's like when you get before a judge, you're paying $6 million for a 30-second Super Bowl commercial. So you need to be tight with your documentation. And one of the most important things ahead of time is learning what the courts consider when it comes to custody, since that's the big issue. I mean, we have clients who deal with, all of our clients have domestic violence, but custody and domestic violence are separate issues. And so knowing what the custody factors are, as well as knowing what something called the alienation factors are, and picking, what we do with our clients is we pick about 2 or 3 themes out of those custody factors, and we start building the case and really focusing on like, this is what matters and here's why. Because just like reams of paper is going to make you look bad, because time is such an important element for court. You want to match the court's values and show respect for the fact that there isn't a lot of time, and that we always encourage our clients, when you go in, you start off with, Your Honor, here's what I'm asking for, and here's why I'm entitled to it. And then taking it from there. And I used to teach high school English. So we did something called the hamburger essay, like the 5-paragraph essay. Your intro, is your opening and your conclusion is your closing. And those 3 paragraphs in the middle are your 3 themes. And that's it. And to really stay laser focused, as well as a bunch of other things with presentation. But in terms of documentation, you have to know why you're there and what you're asking for and whether the court is able to give you what you're asking for. A lot of people think
Yeah.
they're there for validation. You're not going to get it.
No. Well, and one of the things that I often see, when people are emailing me, right, kind of along this lines of like, sometimes I feel like people that are in a state of responding traumatically, right, is the emails are paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. And I'm like, okay, first thing we need to do is encourage them to say, listen, what are the top 3 things? Bullet point these, right? It's going to save you time, money, energy. It's going to help your team better serve you because I think that's part of them processing what's going on. But it really is difficult to kind of navigate through all of those details. It feels murky, right? And so then people are like, well, I don't know. I mean, there's all this information. I mean, I just was talking to somebody this morning. She's like, I've got banker's boxes after banker's boxes. I'm like, okay, first of all, I don't want you going through all of those. Like, we can go direct and get the information. We, meaning the attorney, can help us, right? Get the information from the CPA. They can send us in an electronic file all the things we need. So you're not down there trying to go through banker's boxes and then like, well, I found a statement from 2014 and maybe there's an account there. And I'm like, okay, it just becomes so overwhelming. Data it can be so overwhelming. And we got to figure out a way, to your point, to get it laser focused, be very clear on what we're asking. And we could say that for a lot of parts throughout this case, right? Like forensic accounting, business valuation experts, whatever. People get in there and they're like, there's so much information. They work, 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 bill, 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 bill. And then there's nothing to show for it because they're like, well, we're just scratching the surface on the info. Well, let's identify what we're doing. What are you
Right.
looking for? What are we trying to solve for? And let's go that route,
Right.
right?
Like, what do you want to get and go backwards?
It's an important part of the strategy that I know on the financial side is so important. But if they're looking to, navigate through this and they're looking to their attorney for the guidance and direction on it, they might not be getting it. And so it's facilitating them feeling stuck. So kind of along those lines, I'm all about practical, right? You and I have talked enough. I'm like, give us something practical. So kind of along the lines of, this coercive control, trying to make the case. What are some things that people could be doing? Some practical tips if they are experiencing legal abuse that will help them move in the direction of having clarity.
Okay, so one of the biggest things is choosing the right attorney from the very beginning and knowing the right questions to ask. Ours are the cases which are all extremely complex and difficult. So, sometimes you'll see a list of questions to ask an attorney during a consult. My favorite one, which I think you really need to ask at the end of a consult, is how would you handle a case like mine? Because it's twofold. It shows, first of all, that the lawyer has actually paid attention to the details of what you've said. So are they a good listener? Because you're going to need to have rapport with this attorney. This is going to be an intimate relationship. And so you need to make sure that they have heard you and really get it. And by asking, how would you handle a case like mine? It's not a yes, no question. They have to answer with a strategy. And in that, they have to show that they recognize the difference between high conflict versus normal. Because if yours is difficult, attorneys are trained in logic and logic is not going to work. It's going to waste a ton of money. So finding someone who really gets it, even if they don't have to be an expert in narcissism, but they need to know that we play differently with cases like these because both parties are not going to come to the table and think we're going to do what's fair or we're going to do what's best for the kids. How do you negotiate knowing that everything has to be about making that disordered person the center and making them feel like they're winning and that you're losing and feeling and that you're suffering? So
Yeah.
attorneys have to have some kind of background in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that question. And I think, one of the things kind of taking that even one step further is like, okay, give me a specific example of, a case similar to mine where you had success. Because I think a lot of times, right, the attorneys will give lip service to, oh, we handle this all the time. We work with narcissists all the time. We're not new
Mhm.
to this, blah, blah, blah.
Right,
Okay. But what does that mean?
right.
Right. So we just got to
Show
ask.
me that you know. Show me what you've done. Give me a good story.
Yeah. And I think it's also important too, like, okay, a lot of times they'll give them the strategy, and then I'm like, okay, like sometimes they'll share with me, like from a financial perspective, and I'm like, okay, yes, and though, like, does that really work? Because for me, they have their process in which they do things, but when you have somebody who's constantly avoiding the accountability and they're not giving the information and we're stuck in discovery, the muck of discovery, and women are being asked to make decisions based on information that they don't have. How do we overcome that? Like, what are we doing? And I know for me, like with our clients, we have strategies that we've been able to help them. The order in which you do things matters. The reason that you're doing things matters. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of times the attorneys, again, there's really good ones. And to your point, right? You got to have that right team of people. But there's a lot of them who are like, yeah, well, this is just what we do. And they want to play nice because they're afraid of ticking off the other attorney because they have other cases with them. And it's like, okay, that's not really serving the client.
No, no. And also in these cases, we never want to approach negotiation or resolution from a point of desperation, because that's what they will not stop. Like will give everything
That's
and they
right.
will just keep going. And if they don't do it, then they'll come back in a year and a half and keep taking and taking. So it's being assertive and making sure you have some, first of all, it's making sure you know your rights. And one of your rights is for full transparent discovery. So
Yep.
if you're not getting full transparent discovery, I think there needs to be pushback to say, I can't make a decision, knowing that if
Yep.
you go to court, you're going to be entitled to it.
Yep.
So you need to have it. Otherwise, in my own experience, a judge will go with the best evidence presented. So if one person is hiding information and they refuse to give it, and you've spent all this money and time trying to chase it and they still don't get it, then you can just say something. I mean, it's not that it's ever this easy, but here's my proposal based on the information I know. The other side hasn't presented anything other than self-serving exhibits that they've kind of cobbled
Mm-hmm.
together. Which one are we going to go with? And
Mm-hmm.
trying to get a trial date. That's a big thing. Like you need an end date. My partner Chris calls it the splat date. He always talks about, imagine if you're skydiving and you jump out of the plane and you're heading towards Earth really fast. At some point, you're going to have to pull the parachute. So you need, like, they need to present it. Otherwise, boom, we're going to trial, and then the judge is going to decide
Yep.
if that splat date.
Yep, I love that. Well, and again, like you said, the self-serving exhibits. I mean, sometimes, right, the self-serving exhibits are no exhibits.
I
Like,
know.
like, okay, how is it that like we have done, business valuations for our clients and all of that? He has provided nothing, and yet he's telling everybody that the business isn't worth what, we're saying that it is. But you have nothing to show apart from, oh, I'm going to be homeless. I mean, the stories. And
Oh,
here's the thing. Why? Okay, we could spend a whole episode on this, but why is it when these guys start crying, everybody feels bad for them? Like, oh, he really is going to be homeless. Oh, are you kidding me?
no, no. Well, actually, like in our cases, they don't. I mean, they get away with it for a little while, but then it's like, show me your
That's
stuff.
right.
Uh, but yeah, I don't wanna. It doesn't really hold as a great excuse for too long in court.
No,
They can
no.
get away with it for a little while. People bend over backwards. I know in my own situation, post judgment, the judge, 9 times we went back and the judge was like, okay, sir, you got to produce your discovery. 9 times in a row, oh, I'll do it. And then she kept saying, okay, you have 1 more week, you have 3 more weeks, you have one more. I was like, Your Honor, you were just here and you said this. And she'd be like, well, I got it. And so my ex, it worked out well because he got so arrogant, thinking like, I'm not going to keep paying my attorney to show up. So he fired his attorney. And the next time we went in, I'd been ready the whole time. The judge said, I've given you more than enough chances to my ex. We're starting trial now. And he didn't have someone representing him. And I was ready to go. I'd been ready to go. And boom, we got through day one of a 3-day trial. And he had no one, he was not prepared, of course. And he had no support. And then of course, he hired a new attorney who tried to file a motion to get it all erased. And the judge said, no, I gave him more than enough chances. So while I was getting so frustrated with her, thinking like, how could she be allowing this? She was setting it up so that he couldn't appeal it.
Mm,
So that's another thing to remember is sometimes we think judges are not showing sympathy for us, but judges have to remain unbiased. So they don't want to rush to make decisions. They want to make sure they cover their butts because, they don't want someone to
Yeah.
appeal that'll affect their legacy. So just
Yeah.
know, I learned this so many times when I'd be like going crazy, like, how can they not see it? And then later finding out they had made it so that I was able to get what I needed because the judge had
Mm,
shown that they had really bent over backwards for
yeah.
the person.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? I mean, because you're like, at what point, right? I mean, nine times is a lot. I always equate it to like bad parenting. You're like, you give them all these chances and finally they're like, you know what? There's no consequence,
They
right?
emboldens them. It emboldens people to take advantage. It's awful.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's so terrible, right? Um, and again, it's just that, and again, not necessarily every, judge has a strategy, but hopefully they do. But I think that's really important for people to keep in mind. So full transparency on discovery is certainly an important piece of this. What else?
Another thing where I know I wasted so much money was I had my lawyer negotiating for me, knowing later that my ex just kept changing what he wanted. So tons of money was spent going back and forth between lawyers negotiating. And so one thing
Hmm.
with strategic communication is like, listen, what things come from your ex, like if it's tell your lawyer if it's not like super important, just forward it to you after a certain point because you don't want to spend money for your lawyer to read nonsense and your ex will burn up your legal bills by having your lawyer spend time on stuff. So especially when it comes to negotiation, I'm not just talking about mediation, but outside of that, when you can communicate directly with your ex, unless there's a restraining order or something, that is really empowering and also can save you tons and tons of money. But you need to learn effective negotiation strategies. Again, very different than dealing with a normal person. You're dealing with someone who's usually an addict or has a personality disorder, so their judgment is impaired. So knowing how to work with someone who has impaired judgment.
So kind of along those lines, though, I think about, for the people that have been sitting at their computer and they are getting inundated with, let's just say, emails in this case, right? One of the things that I know I've done in some cases that I've been part of is I set up a separate folder because I don't want those, because every time that email would come in, I would have a sinking feeling in my stomach,
Mhm.
right? So just truncating that into a folder, directing it to go somewhere else so that when I was ready, I could deal with it. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think that's a great suggestion, but that might not work for everybody that's feeling triggered by communicating with, their soon to be ex.
Yeah, so we actually don't really do that because we feel like you're gonna have to deal with it at some point. I can understand not getting those dings because we all feel it like every time we get that notification. But I really believe, and we've seen it, that strategic communication, when you learn how to communicate with your ex effectively, even though you're writing to that person, but you're writing for this invisible audience, it's very empowering because you're dealing with it. But it's understanding, just like with child custody factors, what actually matters. Like, what do I actually have to answer? What techniques is my ex doing to get me riled up? Like, once you understand even that in these cases, your ex just wants your attention. They don't care if it's positive or negative. They actually prefer negative in a lot of ways because they see they can still have that ability to get under your skin. When you start responding appropriately, it really turns the power dynamic around in the relationship. And that's the number one thing we've seen with our clients to get their ex's voice out of their head, to
Yeah.
get their ex from squatting between their ears, I'll say. And but it's actually dealing with it. You can put stuff off, that's fine, but diving in and being like, let's do it and deal with people that know how to do it and can support you through it. We've seen people change in just a few days when they're like, oh, okay, all right, I'm not gonna fall for this anymore.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you see that something is very predictable, you're like, okay, that's just something they do. For example, opposing counsel. People go, I'm really scared because my ex's lawyer is gonna bully me in court. Or what if they do? We're like, they are gonna do it. They're gonna do it. So then how do we respond effectively? So now that fear goes away. It's like, it's gonna happen. It's a
Yep.
different conversation to have of like, what are we gonna do? Same thing with email. they're gonna hit you with walls of angry texts. Of course, you're gonna get blamed for everything. You're gonna be called an unfit parent. They're gonna use things against you, your anxiety medication, the fact that you're an alcoholic, whatever. They're gonna attack that. But we can still deal with that because nobody is perfect, and that's okay. And so how to respond to them appropriately instead of just being like, oh my God, a judge is going to see this and they're going to believe it and they're going to take my kids away, or they're going to make them have him pay me less money. That's not true. It's just learning to stand up to the bully properly instead of
Yeah.
just living in a constant state of fear. And as you know, Rhonda, I'm sure with your clients too, people who have been out for years still live with this sense of dread. If I'm not perfect, something bad is going to happen. And I think
Yep.
strategic communication is the way to deal with it, because that also builds your case for when you go back to court. And I
Yeah.
say when because our clients are always back in court.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. So is there, I know that there are some tools out there for recording, conversations and things like that. I know our Family Wizard is a pretty popular one. Are there any others that you will often suggest that people consider checking out?
Well, in our experience and interviewing lots of attorneys, judges generally don't like recordings. I mean, OFW is different to prove that the kid had a call with the parent. Stuff like that is fine. But with AI now, things can really get manipulated. So generally, judges like to see, and anyone who, not just judges, but anyone who's an officer of the court, they like to see the full context of something. So I think ways to organize your information is helpful, but there's nothing I can think of in particular that can do that for you. But it's not really hard. I think a lot of it is just understanding this is the stuff that matters and then finding what bucket to put it in.
Yeah.
Uh, there's technology out there to teach you how to communicate with your ex, like AI stuff. I think it's a tool, but it doesn't get rid of your PTSD. It's just like,
Yeah.
if someone gives me a box of tools, I'm not gonna be able to build a house. Like I need to know what I'm doing with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't have any shortcuts, sorry.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, I mean, like for example, again, it's what's the goal, right? If the goal is to be able to build up this record of communication, finding a tool that's going to help with that, yeah, you know what I mean? It's kind of like we do with the receipts for the financial stuff. Like, hey, listen, right? Capturing that information, having a place to store it, having a way that when you need it, it's there, you can organize it, whatever. It certainly is helpful. And I think the other part of that, Lisa, is being proactive, right? Because I think a lot of times as women, we want to wait till it's so bad that we're like backed up against a wall, half dead, right? We can start this process of capturing, organizing the information along the way. So then 2 years later, we're not like, oh, now I got to go back and what? Try to recreate the last 2 years. I mean, it's just at that point, way too much.
I know you're reminding me. So one of our clients recently, hers has been a long case, and I think we started working together about a little over a year ago. And so of course we started with strategic communication, and then her ex decided to bring her back to court for a custody modification. And she said, I am so squeaky clean. I'm not even scared, because she's like, I've checked, I know all
Yes.
my communication is perfect.
Yes.
I know the stuff that matters. I'm not scared of the threats. Like it's going to be fine. And she did really, really well. So
Yeah.
I think being prepared ahead of time, we meet people at different stages of the process, but the ones that we say we can help the most, so we can help you whatever stage you're at, but the ones that to save the most amount of time, money, and energy are what we call our babies, the ones at the very beginning of the process
Yep.
who are like, I'm just about to file, like I'm just beginning it. And so we want to make sure that they don't make any of those expensive mistakes. And we often tell them, like, even though, you feel so overwhelmed and scared, you have more power now than you will ever have from now on. So you have the opportunity to do everything right. And so
Yep.
that really calms them down, because it's like, you're not going to make that. We're not going to let you make those mistakes. We have a whole community of people who can help you along, including lots of what we call grizzled veterans. And so it's really comforting to know, that there's people there who get it. There's others in our community who can like guide you along and not feel so alone. And also the strategic stuff to save tons of money, to start with the right attorney, and to understand your attorney's not going to be your savior. We don't want you to repeat that same dynamic of like, oh, my ex, I'd given my authority to my ex over time, and now I'm going to hire someone who's going to save my life. No, you're going to learn to run your case like a business. You're going to understand that yours is different and that you're going to play a much more collaborative role. This is also another opportunity to be so empowering. You
Yeah.
got out of this toxic relationship. Here's the chance to start changing the dynamic moving forward in your life.
Yeah. I love that. I love that because I think ultimately, right, we have an opportunity in this incubator,
Yeah.
right? It really is an incubator where we're like, hey, listen, we want women, right, who are going through this, and I know you work with men too, but we want women who are going through this to be able to find their voice, learn how to communicate. I mean, I remember when I was in college and I took my degree was actually in communications, so I ended up having to take an assertive communications class. And I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my cookies," because it was not something that I was comfortable with at all. Like I had such anxiety about
Yeah.
having to stand up for myself. And it's not because I couldn't do it. It was because a couple things. One, I didn't know how,
Mhm.
and B, I was afraid. And
Yeah.
now, I mean, you look at, all this time has passed, and I mean, I can't imagine not being more assertive. But the caveat there is, listen, even if you haven't done it in the past, you can do it. You have to have, and it's not going to happen overnight, right? But you got to have the right people. You've got to have the right strategies. You got to build this muscle of, doing it. And I see that with our clients, right? Like, okay, you asked for XYZ and you got it. You
Yeah.
stood up to yourself, little small wins that we have to celebrate, along the way. And
Progress. Progress.
oh, it's definitely progress, right?
Celebrate
Like
progress.
yes, very much so. And at the end of the day, right, these are all skills that, thank goodness, right, people are going to be able to take with them after this is over. Hey, you're negotiating, right, the sale of your house, or you're purchasing a business, or you're, developing a prenup should you decide you're going to get married again. Like all these things where you're like, okay, these skills I'm now empowered to take with me well beyond the divorce process. And for me, that's what this is all about. Like, yes, we have a period of time, right, in which we're working with people, but I want them to be better off.
Yeah, yeah. And you're making me think. So we have this weekly legal abuse support group that I always talk about. That's one of our client perks, and we mix our men and women together. And it is just fascinating to watch the interaction, to see people really support each other through it. But one of our clients said recently, she said, not that I'd ever wish this on anyone, but if this hadn't happened, I would have been a doormat my whole life.
Yep.
So
Yep.
she really changed and has gotten a lot more powerful once getting out
That's
of
right. That's
treatment.
right. Yeah, let's start a campaign, right? No doormat. Hashtag no doormat.
I love it. That's a great idea.
Right?
I'm
I
writing
mean,
it down.
seriously, no, like, no, this is not okay.
Yeah.
Um, So we've got full transparency, we've got this negotiating piece and really being able to lean into that. One more tip as we kind of wrap up our time. What's one more thing that we want to make sure that people know?
Okay, so this is the scary thing that happens to so many people in our community, as it's kind of baked into legal abuse, is that's when your ex doesn't have the day-to-day ways to still get at you. They're limited to three things. I always talk about this: money, kids, in the court. And money and the court go hand in hand, but kids last the longest.
Mm,
So people start noticing that their ex is trying to turn the kids against them because they want to take everything from you. They want to leave you homeless, penniless, and childless. And so they want it all and they want you to suffer. And so when this starts, when you a lot of people don't realize it's happening, but it really is part of the post-separation abuse cycle. It's important to pay attention. It's important to pay attention if your ex starts violating the parenting plan, saying that your kid is too busy to see you or doesn't want to see you, to really jump on that legally and take it to court, because it can get a lot worse and it gets a lot harder to turn things around. So
mm,
pay attention to your parenting plan and make sure that you also, one way to really effectively protect yourself when you're putting together a parenting plan. And by the way, that's our next course that we're doing, that we're releasing probably late spring. How to write an airtight parenting plan is you want to put a clause in there that says that your kids should be able to go to therapy if either parent wants them to, because that is a huge issue that people fight about. We see abusive people denying their kids mental health services. So to put it into a parenting plan as a given is going to save you and your children so much time and money and energy and grief. Knowing again the dynamics that these people do post separation, get that therapy clause in there.
What do you think about naming a therapist? Because I can see that be like, oh, yeah, we're agreeing, and I don't want that person, and I don't want that. Like, how do we overcome that part? Kind of taking it just one step further.
Okay, so the tricky thing is people change all the time, but what a lot of people do or is considered fair is that one side comes up with a list of 3 therapist names and the other side gets to choose. You want to be the one that comes up with the names because that way you can at least guarantee like 3 pretty good people. Don't, if you want one in particular, don't pick 2 that aren't taking clients because you'll look bad. So just be good, pick 3 ones that you like and see if your ex will choose one and then put it in there. And then a lot of times therapists will recommend someone if they can't take you anymore. They have to. So you can try that. But
Yeah.
to have something in there where there's a system of doing it that seems kind of fair, try that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because again, right, that process of, trying to overcome as many objections as we can as we're going through this, I think is great. And you're setting yourself up for success because if you've already vetted the people, they're taking on clients, that they'd be a good fit, you don't really care who they pick because it's
Right.
going to be better than nothing, right? So you're still like, this is a win and
Right.
a win. So
Yeah.
I love that. I
And
love
they
that.
still feel like they have power because they get to make the choice.
Great example of kind of what we were talking about, right? Like setting yourself up for success, helping them feel like they're winning.
Right.
I think that's really great.
Yeah.
Well, as always, I've loved our conversation. So grateful for the work that you're doing and the fact that we've been able to collaborate on a couple projects and client stuff. I'm just so grateful because the work that you're doing is important, the work I'm doing is important, and we're on the same page, right? In knowing that we want people to be able to have their voice. We want them to be able to stand up for themselves. We want them to be able to, do the things that they need to be doing to move this case along. So, as we conclude our time, any final thought, comment, quote that you want to leave our listeners with as we wrap up our time together?
Well, I like to think about how terrified that I was at the end of my marriage. I was with my ex for 20 years. And I remember I used to collect books. I used to run a book sale for our library, and I went to this couple's house, an old couple, and the woman had called and she wanted to donate her husband's books, but he was ill. And when I got there, he was like, "I don't want you to take them," because he was getting like agitated. And she said, "Oh, it's okay." And just the love between them, it made like I went back to the car and I felt so bad because I felt like I was never gonna have anything like that. I had made a
Mm,
commitment, I was married, and that things were getting worse and worse with my ex, and I was just terrified about that unknown. Oh, I am so glad I leaped off that high diving board because things are so much better on the other side. This week, Chris and I, my partner, are celebrating 10 years together. It's the love of my life. I have this amazing business. Like my kids are doing really well. Things are great. So just know it is really, really scary. It's supposed to be really scary right now.
mhm.
Get the right support, people that are positive advocates for you that can help get you and guide you through this, you are going to soar. So just remember that it's supposed to be scary. There's no way to avoid it. You're going to be okay. Just get the right support.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for our time together. I feel like this could be an 8-hour podcast and we'd still have things to talk about. But I really appreciate you truncating it, kind of like we were talking about, right? Taking the highlights, really focusing on some practical things that people can do and just talking about the mindset around how to approach when we are experiencing unfortunate legal abuse. So, with that, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure, Rhonda. Anytime. We'll definitely do this again.